All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Silvia Dopazo, and I'm a Regulatory Affairs Specialist with Quality Smart Solutions. Today, we'll be discussing the current regulatory landscape for natural health products in Canada, including licensing trends, common challenges, and some practical insights we've gained from working with companies across the industry. I particularly like the quote on this slide because it captures what I believe effective regulation should achieve. Regulation isn't meant to stand in the way of innovation. It's there to help ensure products are safe, effective, and trusted by consumers. When regulatory considerations are incorporated early in product development, they don't limit innovation, they help guide it. Taking a strategic approach to regulatory affairs can reduce risk, streamline the licensing process, and ultimately help bring innovative products to market more efficiently. With that, let's get started with a quick introduction to who we are at QSS. Quality Smart Solutions, or QSS, was founded in 2007 in Ontario, Canada. Over the past 19 years, we've had the opportunity to work with more than 3,500 companies across 74 countries. Our team is made up of regulatory specialists with hands-on experience navigating Health Canada, the FDA, and other global regulatory frameworks. We support a wide range of regulation services, including natural health products, dietary supplements, medical devices, cosmetics, ingredients, and food products. Natural health products have always been a core of our expertise, so today's topic is one that's very close to home for us, and we're excited to share some of that experience with you. A little bit about me. I've been working in regulatory affairs for nearly 15 years with a primary focus on natural health products. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to help bring products to the Canadian market and support product registrations in numerous countries around the world. I really enjoy helping companies navigate what can often be a complex regulatory landscape. So I'm excited to be here today to share some practical insights and hopefully make the Canadian NHP regulatory process a little easier to navigate. Before we dive in, here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll start with the Canadian regulatory framework for natural health products and discuss how products are classified, since that really sets the stage for everything that follows. From there, we'll walk through the different licensing pathways, some of the most common reasons applications get delayed or refused, and a few of the regulatory trends we're seeing in today's NHP landscape. We'll also touch on how companies can better prepare for successful submissions and share some practical insights based on the types of challenges we help clients navigate every day. Finally, we'll wrap up with some resources, information about QSS, how QSS supports companies in this space, and leave plenty of time for questions. By the end of today's session, we'll have a better understanding of how natural health products are regulated in Canada, what the different licensing pathways look like, the common pitfalls that can delay applications, and some practical strategies for navigating the regulatory process more efficiently. To set the stage for the rest of today's presentation, let's begin with a quick refresher on what qualifies as a natural health product. Natural health products, or NHPs, encompass a broad range of products, from vitamins and minerals to herbal medicines, probiotics, and traditional medicines. What they all have in common is that they're intended to help maintain or improve health and are regulated by Health Canada before they can be sold. NHPs occupy a unique space between foods and pharmaceuticals. They provide consumers with access to health-supporting products while operating within a framework that's designed to ensure products are safe, of high quality, and supported by appropriate evidence for the claims being made. Understanding that pre-market review process is key because it influences everything we'll discuss next, from product classification and licensing pathways to the common challenges companies encounter during the application process. One thing that makes Canada's regulatory framework somewhat unique is that natural health products require pre-market authorization. Before a product can legally be sold in Canada, Health Canada reviews the evidence supporting its safety, efficacy, and quality. If the product meets these requirements, it is issued a natural product number, or NPN, indicating that it has been authorized for sale. However, obtaining an NPN is only one part of the regulatory life cycle, as illustrated in this slide. Companies must also ensure their manufacturing sites comply with good manufacturing practices, or GMPs, maintain compliant product labels, and appropriately manage any future formulation or label changes. Regulatory responsibilities also continue after a product reaches the market. Health Canada monitors products through activities such as compliance verification, adverse reaction reporting, and the review of amendments and notifications when changes are made. Maintaining compliance throughout the product lifecycle is essential, not only to meet regulatory requirements, but also to help minimize the risk of enforcement actions, product recalls, or disruptions to market access. Before we dive into regulations and licensing, it's important to appreciate the scale of NHP use in Canada. According to Health Canada research published in 2024, approximately 73% of Canadians report using at least one natural health product. These products have become an integral part of many Canadians' health and wellness routines, whether it's taking a multivitamin, using probiotics for digestive health, supplementing with vitamin D, or seeking support for sleep, stress, or immune health. As demand for self-care and preventative health solutions continues to grow, so does the responsibility of industry and regulators to ensure that products entering the market are safe, effective, and of high quality. This is where the natural health products regulations and the product licensing process play a critical role. One of the most important decisions in the regulatory process happens before an application is even submitted: product classification. To understand why regulatory outcomes vary so much across products, we need to start at the beginning with classification. This is essentially the gateway decision in the regulatory pathway. It determines whether a product is regulated as an NHP, a food, or another category under Health Canada's framework, and everything downstream flows from that initial determination. While classification is often the first regulatory decision made, it influences every step that follows, from formulation and claims to licensing, labeling, marketing, and ultimately whether a product can legally be sold in Canada. Put simply, classification determines the regulatory pathway. I like to compare product classification to baking. In this case, a product concept is the idea. Classification is like the recipe. If I decide I want to bake a cake, I need a cake recipe. If I accidentally follow a bread recipe, I'm unlikely to achieve the outcome I intended. The same principle applies to product classification. Before we can determine licensing requirements, evidence expectations, claims, or labeling obligations, we first need to determine what type of product we're dealing with. Getting classification right from the outset lays the foundation for a successful regulatory strategy. It can help avoid costly delays, reformulations, relabeling, or unexpected regulatory hurdles later in the product development process. It is not just a technicality, but rather the foundation of a successful product strategy. Now that we've established why classification is important, let's look at the distinction between natural health products and other regulated product categories. Natural health products include products such as vitamins, minerals, probiotics, herbal remedies, and homeopathic medicines. Before they can be sold in Canada, they require a product license from Health Canada and are assigned a natural product number, or NPN. Their safety, efficacy, and quality must be supported, and they are regulated under the natural health products regulations. On the other hand, not every health and wellness product is an NHP. Depending on the ingredients, claims, dosage form, and intended use, a product may instead be classified as a food, cosmetic, or drug. Each of these categories is subject to its own regulatory framework, evidence requirements, and authorization pathways. While two products may look very similar to consumers, they can have very different regulatory obligations. For example, a vitamin gummy may be regulated as an NHP, while a fortified snack or beverage may be regulated as a food. Similarly, a skin cream may be classified as a cosmetic, but if it is intended to treat a medical condition, it could be regulated as a drug. The key takeaway is that similar products can have very different regulatory requirements, depending on how they are classified. Understanding those distinctions early can help avoid costly surprises later in the process. While some products fit clearly into a regulatory category, others don't fall neatly into one category, leaving them in a gray area and require a more detailed classification assessment. Many of today's innovative products blur the lines between foods, natural health products, cosmetics, and drugs. This is particularly common with emerging product categories such as functional foods, adaptogenic beverages, mushroom, and products containing novel ingredients. In these cases, classification isn't determined by a single factor. Health Canada may consider the ingredients claims, dosage form, route of administration, recommended use, and overall product representation. A good example is the mushroom coffee category. To consumers, these products may appear to be coffee or beverage products. However, many contain medicinal ingredients such as lion's mane or reishi or L-theanine and are marketed for benefits such as focus. In these cases, Health Canada looks beyond the format of the product and considers the ingredients, claims, intended use, and overall representation when determining the appropriate classification. As innovation continues to evolve, these borderline products are becoming increasingly common, making early classification assessments more important than ever. So once we've determined whether a product is an NHP, food, cosmetic, or a drug, the next step is understanding which regulatory pathway applies and what is required to bring that product to market. Once a product is classified, the focus shifts from what is it to how do we bring it to market. This is where regulatory pathways come into play and where strategy becomes just as important as classification itself. Earlier, we talked about product classification as identifying the recipe. Once we know what we're making, the next step is determining the regulatory pathway, the set of instructions for getting that product licensed. While two products may both be classified as natural health products, the pathway to market can look very different depending on the ingredients, proposed claims, and available evidence. Think of it like baking a cake. While the goal may be the same, not every recipe requires the same level of effort. Some recipes are simple and rely on familiar ingredients and straightforward instructions, while others involve a more complex ingredients, additional preparation, and more time. Similarly, although all NHP applications aim to obtain an NPN, the pathway to approval depends on the product's ingredients, claims, and supporting evidence. Some products align closely with existing monographs and can follow a more straightforward review process, while others require more comprehensive scientific support and a higher level of regulatory assessment. Choosing the appropriate pathway early is important because it influences the supporting documentation required, the level of review, and ultimately the time it takes to bring a product to market. Health Canada recognizes 3 application classes: Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Although all 3 pathways lead to the same outcome, a licensed product with an MPN, the route taken depends on how well the product aligns with established monographs and regulatory guidance. Let's take a closer look at each application class and what distinguishes them. Health Canada generally categorizes NHP applications into 3 classes based on how closely the product aligns with existing regulatory standards and monographs. Class 1 applications are considered the most straightforward. These products align completely with existing Health Canada monographs, meaning all parameters match pre-approved conditions. Because Health Canada has already assessed the evidence supporting these conditions, these applications are processed through an attestation-based pathway and typically receive the fastest review. Class 2 applications are appropriate for products that don't fully align with a single Health Canada monograph, but can still be supported using existing monographs and pre-cleared information. Because these applications require additional regulatory assessment, they typically undergo a more detailed review than Class 1 applications. Class 3 applications are those that require Health Canada to conduct a full assessment of the scientific evidence submitted in support of the product. When people hear Class 3, they often assume it means the product contains a novel ingredient. While that can be the case, Class 3 applications can also be triggered by more familiar ingredients used in a way that falls outside the existing monographs. For example, at an unconventional dose, for a new health claim, or in a novel dosage form or delivery format. In these cases, Health Canada evaluates the evidence package to determine whether the proposed ingredients, recommended conditions of use, and health claims are supported by appropriate evidence and demonstrate the product's safety and efficacy. Because this pathway requires a comprehensive scientific review, Class 3 applications generally have the longest review timelines. Even with a clear pathway in place, applications rarely move through without friction. There are a number of recurring challenges that consistently impact timelines, approvals, and overall regulatory success. One thing we've learned through working with hundreds of submissions is that regulatory challenges rarely exist in isolation. More often, they arise from a combination of factors that compound throughout the product development process. A company may have a strong product concept but lacked sufficient evidence to support it. Even when documentation is available, challenges can arise when product proposed claims extend beyond what the evidence supports or what is permitted under the NHP regulations. Another area that often creates difficulty is the product license application process itself. While the EPLA system has streamlined submissions, it relies on predefined pathways and attestations that do not always accommodate unique products or novel circumstances. In those situations, additional regulatory rationale and supporting documentation may be required. Adding to this complexity, regulations, guidance documents, and policy interpretations continue to evolve, requiring companies to stay informed and adapt to changing expectations. We're also seeing more innovative products entering the market that don't fit neatly into traditional categories, creating classification challenges and uncertainty around the appropriate regulatory pathway. Finally, for international companies, products that are successful in other jurisdictions often require modification before they can meet Canadian requirements, whether due to differences in ingredient limits, permitted claims, or evidence expectations. Ultimately, successful submissions are not just about having a good product. They're about understanding and navigating the regulatory framework that surrounds it. While these are some of the most common challenges we see across industry, they often manifest in very specific ways during Health Canada's review process. Let's take a look at some of the most common reasons that submissions get delayed. Documentation. One of the most common causes of delays is incomplete documentation. In many cases, the issue isn't that the evidence doesn't exist. It's that it hasn't been provided, referenced properly, or packaged in a way that allows reviewers to efficiently assess the submission. Missing references, incomplete evidence packages, and administrative deficiencies can all result in requests for clarification, which ultimately extends review timelines. Claim substantiation. Claims are often where science, marketing, and regulation intersect. We frequently see situations where the available evidence supports a benefit, but the proposed wording goes beyond what the evidence can justify. Delays can occur when claims aren't aligned with monographs, when human evidence is lacking, or when marketing language unintentionally creates a stronger regulatory claim than intended. Regulatory strategy. Many delays actually begin long before a submission reaches Health Canada. Without a clear regulatory strategy, companies may underestimate evidence requirements, choose an inappropriate pathway, or assume monograph compliance without fully verifying it. Taking the time to identify potential evidence gaps and regulatory hurdles early can prevent significant delays later in the process. Okay, misclassification. Even when supporting documentation is complete and claims are appropriately substantiated, product classification can still create significant delays. The regulatory landscape continues to evolve, particularly with products that blur the line between foods, supplemented foods, and natural health products. New ingredients and novel delivery formats often require additional assessment to determine the appropriate regulatory pathway. If classification concerns arise during review, applications may require revisions or even a different submission approach, impacting timelines considerably. Product changes during review. Another challenge we sometimes see are changes to the product after submission. Product development doesn't always stop when an application is filed, but modifications made during review can create complications. Changes to a formula, manufacturing process, or suppliers may require updates to supporting documentation and could require revisions once an MPN is received, since revisions to in-process submissions is not permitted. In some situations, the submission being reviewed no longer reflects the product that the company intends to market, resulting in delays while a path forward is determined. This also leads to our information request notices, or also known as IRNs. Even well-prepared submissions may receive information request notices during review. These requests are intended to clarify information or address concerns identified by Health Canada. While many IRNs can be resolved relatively quickly, others may require more substantial changes to the product claims or application strategy. Occasionally, the requested changes are not commercially feasible or align poorly with the company's objectives. In those situations, applicants may choose to withdraw and resubmit other than continue with the existing application, which can significantly extend timelines. And review delays. Some delays are simply beyond the applicant's control. Health Canada continues to manage a high volume of Class 2 and Class 3 applications, and review timelines can be affected by workload, prioritization efforts, and resource availability. As a result, even strong submissions may require review periods that exceed published service standards, which is the case for Class 2 and Class 3 applications. Understanding these broader system pressures is important when planning product launches and setting stakeholder expectations. Before we dive into the regulatory details, it's helpful to take a step back and look at the current NHP landscape. Understanding the broader trends shaping the industry provides valuable context for many of the regulatory challenges and opportunities we'll discuss next. The current NHP landscape is defined by a combination of regulatory modernization, scientific innovation, and increased oversight. Health Canada's expectations around evidence, product classification, and compliance continue to evolve, creating both new challenges and new opportunities for industry. Natural health product submissions have become increasingly complex over the past few years. While many products can still follow monographs, there is now much greater scrutiny around ingredient identity, manufacturing information, safety evidence, and the rationale supporting claims. As a result, we're also seeing more information request notices being issued during the review process. This makes having a well-developed regulatory strategy from the outset more important than ever. One of the most common challenges we encounter is claim substantiation. A company may have strong scientific evidence demonstrating the benefits of an ingredient, but that doesn't necessarily mean Health Canada will accept the exact wording of the proposed claims. The evidence must support both the scientific effect and the specific language being used. Selecting claims that align with available evidence and existing monographs can help avoid unnecessary delays and requests for additional information. Innovation in the natural health products industry continues to move at an incredible pace, with new ingredients and dosage forms entering the market every year. However, regulatory frameworks don't always evolve at the same speed. This can create uncertainty around ingredient classification, acceptable evidence requirements, and even whether a product is regulated as a natural health product, supplemented food, or food. Evaluating these considerations early in development is becoming increasingly important. The rapid growth of e-commerce has increased the availability of health products in Canada, including many products that may not fully comply with Canadian regulatory requirements. Consumers can easily access products from international sellers, often featuring claims, ingredients, or formulations that would not be permitted under the natural health products regulations. This creates challenges for both regulators and compliant companies, including increased market competition, consumer confusion, and potential enforcement risks. As online sales continue to grow, regulatory oversight of digital marketplaces remains an evolving area within the Canadian NHP landscape. Although Health Canada's published service standards remain unchanged, many companies are experiencing longer overall review timelines, including for Class 2 and Class 3 applications. Increased scrutiny during the review process often results in more IRNs related to claims, evidence, product classification, and formulation. Investing in a strong regulatory strategy and submitting a complete, well-supported application from the outset can help reduce delays and facilitate a smoother review process. As of mid-June 2026, this snapshot illustrates the current volume of Class 2 and Class 3 applications under review, providing context for today's regulatory environment and application review timelines. I wanted to include this slide simply to provide some perspective on the current review environment. This is a snapshot of Health Canada's application inventory as of mid-June 2026 and helps illustrate the volume of applications currently being managed. While this represents a moment in time, and these numbers will continue to change, it highlights that both Class 2 and Class 3 application inventories remain significant, with a large number of files exceeding published service standards. This helps explain why many companies are experiencing longer overall review timelines, particularly when applications require clarification or additional supporting evidence. It's also another reminder of the value of submitting complete, high-quality applications and planning for sufficient regulatory lead times. Let's take a look at how regulatory changes are also impacting industry today. In recent years, we've seen a clear shift in the regulatory landscape for natural health products in Canada. While the framework itself hasn't fundamentally changed, the way it is being interpreted and enforced has become more rigorous in several key areas. One of the most notable changes is increased scrutiny during product review. We're seeing more detailed questions from Health Canada around claims, classification decisions, and overall product positioning, particularly where products sit close to the boundaries between categories. At the same time, enforcement in the online space has become much more active. It's no longer just about what's on the physical label. Health Canada is increasingly looking at e-commerce listings, advertising copy, and marketplace content to ensure consistency across all consumer touchpoints. We're also seeing evolving expectations around evidence. While monographs remain a key pathway, there is a growing emphasis on ensuring that claims are appropriately supported, particularly for combination products or formulations that fall outside monograph parameters. Finally, the ingredient landscape itself is changing. As more innovative and hybrid ingredients enter the market, we continue to see classification challenges between NHPs, foods, and even drug boundaries, which often becomes one of the main drivers of delays or reformulation at the submission stage. The regulatory environment isn't static. It's continually evolving. Over the years, Health Canada has strengthened its approach to evidence, compliance, and oversight to keep pace with innovation and emerging risks. Overall, Health Canada has continued to modernize the NHP framework through clearer monographs, improved guidance, and more predictable regulatory expectations, supporting both industry compliance and product innovation. I've listed some examples on this slide. Another thing I wanted to mention is updates that they provide for monographs or anything like that can be reviewed in the NHP ID. Another thing is here I only mentioned one new monograph, an updated monograph, the digestive enzymes monograph, and as well one that's currently under consultation, the black cumin seed oil monograph. But if you look in the monographs itself and scroll all the way to the bottom, another thing that has been improved or modernized by Health Canada is the visibility as to changes that have been happening in the monographs. Another positive evolution has been Health Canada's increased engagement with industry. Rather than implementing changes in isolation, Health Canada is more frequently seeking stakeholder feedback through consultations, draft guidance documents, and working groups. This collaborative approach helps ensure that regulatory updates are practical while still meeting public health objectives. In recent years, we've seen a clear shift in the regulatory landscape for natural health products in Canada. One of the most notable changes is increased scrutiny during product review. We're seeing more detailed questions from Health Canada around claims, classification decisions, and overall product positioning, particularly where products sit close to the boundaries between categories. At the same time, enforcement in the online space has become more active. It's no longer just about what's on the physical label. And yeah, so many of the points pointed out here are things that we want to take into consideration for industry, like longer review timelines, higher importance of early strategy, greater need for documentation, and more post-market attention. While Health Canada has made significant progress in modernizing the natural health product regulatory framework over the past few years, the landscape continues to evolve. Looking ahead, several initiatives and emerging trends are expected to influence how natural health products are developed, licensed, and brought to market. Although we can't predict every regulatory change, Health Canada's recent direction provides valuable insight into where the program is headed. By staying informed and proactively adapting to these changes, companies can better position themselves to maintain compliance, reduce regulatory risk, and take advantage of new opportunities as they emerge. Let's take a look at what may be on the horizon. As we've discussed through today's presentation, the Canadian NHP regulatory landscape continues to evolve. While the core regulatory framework remains in place, Health Canada's priorities are shifting toward greater modernization, more risk-based oversight, stronger evidence expectations, increased scrutiny of innovative products in digital marketplaces, and continued collaboration with industry. These changes reflect a broader move toward a more transparent, science-based, and life cycle approach to regulation. For companies, the challenge is no longer simply meeting today's requirements, it's anticipating tomorrow's expectations. So the question becomes, how can organizations position themselves to succeed in this evolving environment? Let's take a look at some practical strategies that can help companies adapt and stay ahead. The companies that are most successful in this environment are the ones that take a proactive approach. Instead of treating regulatory as a final step, they integrate it early into product development, aligning claims, formulation, and classification from the beginning. This reduces the risk of delays, reformulation, or refusals later in the process. It also means ensuring consistency across all channels, not just the label, but also e-commerce and marketing materials, and building a strong evidence package before submission, rather than reacting to questions during review. The companies that succeed won't be those that simply respond to regulatory change. They'll be the ones that anticipate it. One of the biggest opportunities for companies is to involve regulatory expertise early in the product development process. Regulatory considerations should begin once the formulation is finalized on the label or the label has been designed. They should help guide those decisions from the start. Taking a proactive approach can reduce the need for reformulation, minimize label revisions, help avoid IRNs, and ultimately lead to a more efficient licensing process and faster time to market. Just to give you a sense of how QSS works with NHP companies, these are some of the areas we most commonly support. Many of the topics we've covered today, such as product classification, licensing pathways, and application challenges, are things we help clients navigate every day. Whether it's preparing and submitting NPN applications, ensuring labels are bilingual and compliant, assisting ingredient suppliers with master files, or providing ongoing regulatory support, we work with companies throughout the entire life cycle of an NHP product. And for companies located outside of Canada looking to enter the Canadian market, we also offer importer of record services through our sister company, Quality Import Solutions, to help streamline and import the process. There's certainly a lot more we could cover, but if anything we've discussed today resonates with where you're at, or if you have questions about your own products or regulatory strategy, we'd be happy to chat after the webinar. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you found this session informative and that it has provided valuable insights into the current NHP landscape. as well as where the industry may be headed. I'd also like to welcome my colleague, David Johnson, who is joining us today as an advisor. Dave brings a wealth of experience and industry knowledge, and he'll be joining me for the Q&A to help answer your questions and provide additional perspective. With that, we'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Silvia. I don't know if you want to take this one, but I would say there's typically not really like a formal application you can submit to get advice from Health Canada. I would say customer service would not be their number one priority. So unfortunately, providing guidance is typically not, once again, highest on their priority list. So that's where we're happy to help brands with classification when it is a little ambiguous. You can do things, I guess, like scheduling pre-submission meetings with them, or trying to email them and get some feedback. But maybe Silvia, you can shine some more light on this. But I feel like often they will just refer back to the regulations and not necessarily give you a clear yes or no answer on where you fall, but they will more just kind of point you back to the point of the regulations that you're probably sitting there wondering how it's going to be interpreted anyway. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that, but
yeah, no, I think that's great. And also, one of the things that I use often is reaching out to the client services unit. So if I have questions of things that don't quite neatly fall in the category or somewhere that I can interpret from the regulations or the monographs, I'll sometimes reach out to them and ask there as well. Another thing too is looking at maybe even like the combination of monographs document as well to see if there's some information there as well. But that's a good question. Borderline products are a big topic, and yeah, there's definitely a need for help in that category.
NHPs for pets versus humans. So they are different. So Health Canada has a formal product category called veterinary health products. So it's very similar, but it is a different classification. It does not fall into the NPN category. It requires a notification number. It's an NN. So similar, you have to submit information around your ingredients, quantities, claims, intended species of use, directions for use, that type of thing. So we can help with pet products as well. So yeah, if you want to reach out separately, it sounds like you got a couple questions. I guess, Silvia, can you kind of leverage the same kind of evidence for both? I know like NPNs, you typically require human trials to be completed. So I don't know.
No, that's a good question.
Overlap.
We definitely have other colleagues on the team that are more experienced with veterinary health products. So if you have questions or anything that you want the team to look at, definitely reach out and they can help give you more specific answers as to what you're looking for.
Yeah, we've definitely worked with some functional mushroom products specifically. I know that's you mentioned that in your question. So yeah, Robert, feel free to reach out and we can point you, like Silvia said, to our appropriate colleagues. Silvia, I don't know if you have the amendment link handy, but if you do,
yeah.
If you could put it in the chat, that would be helpful.
I definitely do.
There you go. Yes, exactly.
1 second.
And I guess, Casey, just when changes are required, sometimes the change, depending on what it is, can be completed through a notification. Some changes require an amendment, and some would require a new application. So if you do need any advice on kind of like which category your specific change would fall into, same thing. You're welcome to reach out, and then we can try and help your specific scenario.
Okay.
And I did see Silvia posted that in the chat.
Yes, Casey, it's there for you. Any other questions? Did I miss anybody?
Okay, yeah, I know Alessandra, I think, had a few that came in from our YouTube channel. Yeah, exactly. So, just one general piece of advice. I'll take a crack at this. So I guess I very often am speaking with brand owners, and I would say they fall into kind of two distinct buckets. It's often either an existing brand that's selling a product outside of Canada, and we're helping them during their initial launch, or there's a new brand that is kind of more of a startup business. So for existing brands, if you have one flagship product, it might be a little different where your hands might be a little tied if one of your ingredients or one of your dosages is not monographed. But whenever someone has like a product portfolio, if you can, typically starting with the monographed ingredients and those products that would fall into class 1 and class 2 applications from an ingredient and a quantity standpoint, that's typically going to be like your easiest entry point. And for those brands, we're often talking to them about their claims. So you may need to be, you're going to have to drop new labels anyways for Canada. So, having some flexibility on what claims you're willing to make about your product, that would be a big consideration for existing brands. And I guess just in general for most people, I've was on another webinar on the topic similarly, and slow and steady kind of wins the race. It's like do things right once rather than rushing and having to kind of go back and recomplete steps. As Silvia mentioned, there are a few different reasons why projects sometimes kind of go off the rails or delays happen. A lot of it is changes happen throughout, from what was initially started versus what's actually going to get submitted or what wants to get approved. So yeah, the more you can kind of like really finalize things before moving on to the next stage, those are going to be huge. And then, yeah, for a new brand, if I was, starting up a new product and you have flexibility still in the formula, the Health Canada monograph system, there's a lot of ingredients, a lot of claims, so I think that even within their pre-cleared framework, there's a lot of, opportunity to bring unique, kind of trendy products to market. So yeah, wherever possible, I would try and leverage the monographs and the existing already cleared dosages and claims and ingredients. And yeah, start in maybe a more competitive space, but something that you can get to market in a reasonable amount of time. So Silvia, anything else from you?
Yes. So I think pretty much kind of like what you said is really just start your regulatory planning early. So thinking about your strategy earlier on can really help significantly to reduce time and resources later in the process. So really thinking about the regulatory aspect or incorporating it early in your product development process is really critical. A lot of times, products are made and that's not taken into consideration. That really does lead to a lot of delays down the road. So that would be my point.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is very tough for us to like retroactively help or unwind situations. We often get people reaching out that have border issues when products is literally in transit across the. It's very hard for us or really anyone to kind of jump in and help at that point when things have been completed that are already not done in a compliant fashion. So yeah, I would completely echo that. As early on, you got to be considering these things up front. So. All right, the link did not work. I don't know, Casey, if you want to maybe send an email to info@Quality Smart Solutions there, and then we can send you over the right link. Gary Leong, that is a good piece of advice. I would agree with that. For startup brands, if you can make financial sense of manufacturing in Canada, they often will have higher minimum order quantities than international manufacturers. But if you can make sense of manufacturing in Canada financially, it's going to be your easiest path forward from a regulatory standpoint. Just the least amount of parties involved, if you will. But often we understand that, once again, that minimum order quantities are large and expensive for some Canadian manufacturers in relation to international. So yeah, I completely get that point for sure, Gary.
Nice to see you out there, Gary. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. Alessandra, was there any other questions? It's funny you brought up the baking recipe. I very often bring up the cooking recipe. I watch a lot of cooking shows and stuff. And yeah, the NPN, I always relate to kind of the ingredients in the recipe, and the site licensing side being more like, okay, now you actually have to make it. And, Health Canada is going to judge if you overcook the steak or not. And that's kind of what you get judged from that point of view. So I liked your baking analogy.
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a good way to relate it.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
All right. Yeah. Well, yeah, if that's it, Silvia, thank you. I know I learned a lot myself. Oh, there's another question. Opinion about NHP and drug establishment license pathways. I guess there would be kind of two different pathways in my opinion. One would be for drugs, and one would be for natural health products. I think today's call was, mainly focused on the natural health product pathway. There's definitely a lot of similarities in terms of label requirements, product registration requirements, manufacturing, import considerations for, the drug establishment license. So yeah, I would say they're very similar. They kind of cover the same foundational items, but you'd have to, for a lot of it, we see sunscreen brands, for example, you have one mineral-based sunscreen and you have one, traditional kind of OTC drug sunscreen. You're unfortunately going to have to feel like you're kind of duplicating efforts. You're going to have to register both products, one as a drug, one as a health product. You're going to have probably an importer or a manufacturer, one license as a drug manufacturer, one license as a natural health product manufacturer. So yeah, if you're doing both, like I said, it's going to feel a little cumbersome probably, but overall, very similar considerations of make sure your product is classified correctly and that you are a drug or a natural health product. And then, think about what those boxes are that you're going to have to check before coming to market.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. And just overall, there are differences for NHP and drugs, obviously based on claims and things like that. And the drug pathways definitely take much longer. I've only had a little limited experience working on the common technical documentation, but there is a lot more documentation involved, clinical studies that are involved with it. So the process is definitely longer and more complex.
Yeah, and I guess similar to natural health products where, we've talked about class 3 applications being a lot longer timeline, a lot, more work in terms of preparing the safety and efficacy. Similarly, not all OTC drugs are created the same. So, it really is going to depend on your active ingredient, and how that is considered. If it's an abbreviated new drug submission, for example, like minoxidil is a, for hair growth, it's essentially like Rogaine. That product trendy in the US, we get a lot of interest about it. It's an abbreviated new drug submission and requires a very expensive regulatory submission versus, some over-the-counter sunscreens probably being the most common example, but shampoos and things like that. A lot of the time those can be licensed much quicker, even though they are also over-the-counter drugs. So yeah, kind of back to our earliest point of classification is number one. You got to figure out what pathway you have to follow. Cool. So yeah, I know we're approaching the hour. So yeah, thanks everyone for the questions. We appreciate the participation. Silvia, thank you for your time and for all the information today. If anyone has questions or wants to speak with with Silvia, you're welcome to email the info at email that's on the screen here, and then we can connect.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave, and thank you everyone again for taking a little slice of your day and joining us.
Yeah, happy Canada Day, everyone.
Happy Canada Day.
Thank you.